Hi, I'm Matt Reynolds. I'm the editor of Packaging World magazine, and I'm here with my colleagues Liz Cuneo from Healthcare Packaging and Derek Teal from Pro Food World. We're here on a Friday for an end of the line podcast where we've got a skeleton crew today. One of our anchors on this podcast, Sean, is at a conference, and most of our offices, frankly, they're at a soiree on Lake Michigan this afternoon for a summer party. So we're far flung. I'm in Wisconsin. Derek's in Michigan, and I think Liz, you're in South Carolina now, but
Yep.
soon to be also Michigan.
Right.
So,
Yep. Weeks.
so, so we're missing out on the party, but we'll have a little party of our own with our end of the line podcast. So, ladies first, Liz, what are you seeing coming across your desk this week? Anything interesting? Anything new?
Yeah, we just so I uploaded we're going to be having a two-part series. I uploaded the first part of article series called "The Label Nobody Counted: Why Labeling is the Regulated Packaging's Overlooked Sustainability Problem." So, it's kind of a interesting look at labeling, and it's not really the label itself that's the problem from a sustainability standpoint. It's how we manage it is really what the article is about. Label changes, obsolete inventory, and all the waste that goes along with that. So it's kind of an interesting look at where you might be losing money and really hurting your sustainability footprint is really with your labeling. So it kind of gives readers in the pharma companies a way to kind of start looking at what that might look like. One idea is kind of interesting, treating label waste like any other manufacturing KPI. So the author talks about measuring it through the label waste index. So as you know, you have to define a problem before you can fix it. So it's kind of looking at um, trying to figure out how many labels you're throwing away, and then you improve the process from there to make a real sustainability impact. So a cool article that gives some practical how-tos to improve sustainability when talking about labeling and inventory management. And we'll have part two out in the next couple weeks. So it is from a highly regarded packaging engineer in the medical device space. So definitely relevant and timely, and just kind of a different angle when we talk about sustainability. So kind of neat.
Okay, so they're basically keeping track of the types of materials, the weights of the materials, the gauges. Is this related to reporting for EPR at all, do you think? I mean, because that EPR reporting and compliance requires a lot of figuring out exactly what your packaging is, how much there is. It sounds like this is similar, but on a microcosm specific to labels.
Well, it kind of poses the question of on-demand printing, if that's really the future of the space is, when we're talking about sustainability. So kind of moving away from those pre-printed huge label runs and getting more into the on-demand, print what you need. It allows you to be more nimble when talking about regulations that are constantly changing. So as far as EPR, I'm not sure if there's a case for on-demand printing and how that could affect that regulation specifically. But it is looking at really reducing the obsolete label.
Okay. Okay. So efficiency. I mean,
Yeah.
that's one of those things where being green to make green, you're actually saving money that way as well, because reduction in materials, reduction in how much you're buying. Obviously, you have to rely on digital printing, and digital printing at speeds of variable data can be difficult. So it's a matter of if you're not going the speed of, say, a Coca-Cola, where you're doing, I don't know, 1,000 bottles a minute or something like that, but I would assume pharmaceuticals, you might be going at a speed that can withstand that kind of variable data on-demand printing that some of the bigger brands that are going super fast might have more difficulty with.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just an interesting look at looking at sustainability kind of like from a different, it's almost more manageable, right? We're not looking at changing your materials, or completely changing your packaging, but it's kind of like how can you print your labels more efficiently that you would, as a byproduct, have less waste.
Good. Good. Derek, what's new with you? You're in Michigan. You're hopefully
Yeah.
avoiding all lettuce, especially shredded lettuce where you are.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I wanted to talk about this week was diarrhea. I mean, Liz got to talk about blood, so turn this to the bodily fluids podcast. Maybe that'd be easier to remember. But yeah, it's funny. Like before it had even really begun to become a thing, I was a friend of mine who works construction was, just feeling really terrible. and he's out on a construction site. It was I think the couple weeks we were, in the near 100-degree weather. He's on a construction site out there. We're the only place that he could, use as a facility was an outhouse in 100-degree weather. And, if you're having intestinal or stomach issues, digestive issues, that's not the place you want to be in that type of weather. But yeah, the interesting part about that, is if you're to think about what happened a couple years ago with Boar's Head and how that the public, the way they turned on Boar's Head when it came to light as to what was happening in their factory, you don't have that really going on right now. Of course, there are people that think that it's Taylor Farms, or the FDA came out and said, "Oh, it's Taylor Farms," and they said, "Oh, wait a minute, no, it's not Taylor Farms." And right now, that ire is being directed at the FDA and the regulatory bodies overseeing this. And I thought it was just an interesting turn that, you know, if the source is ever found that, well, when it gets found eventually, someday, maybe, it's not really the ire still won't be on that company. It'll be at the FDA for failing to be
Hmm.
able to stem it or to identify it right away. Um,
Well, so
now
Derek
that
Mason heard it was Taylor Farms, I heard, or it was Taco Bell. There's kind of a lot of like misleading source information. So are you saying we don't know where it's coming from still?
they're pretty sure that some of it has come from Taylor Farms, but
Okay.
there was a specific Taylor Farms to Mexico was, oh, this is the source, and later the FDA retracted that.
Okay.
So they still think it's iceberg lettuce from Taylor Farms for some, but there are increasingly more outbreaks happening. And
Hmm.
again, because we don't have, people are saying, different sources are saying, well, because the FDA, there were all these cuts to the FDA, they laid off all these people, and so they stopped, or Cyclospora became from a went from a mandatory to an optional, you know, uh, the
Testing kind of thing?
testing exactly
Oh,
for the
wow.
FDA that and it went to optional. And so this is what's happening that people are saying, well, because of all these cuts, because of these changes, we're not
Mhm.
able to identify it, so we're not able to figure out what the source is and to tell people to stop eating this and to just take care of this issue. Don't even know what food to recall exactly. So you could say it's Taco Bell lettuce, but lettuce from Taylor Farms that went to Taco Bell, but we don't know.
Right.
So in the
Mhm.
meantime, people are you go into a restaurant saying, nope, no lettuce. But for all we know, it's the onions, it's the tomatoes. We don't really know exactly because it's usually on produce, not just specifically lettuce. So
Hmm.
it's just been a really interesting, in my eye, turn of events as to uh, you know that how that they're I don't know whoever the culprit is going to I don't want to say escape because they're definitely going to have some sort of repercussions, but that ire again, it's at the FDA, it's at the regulatory bodies that are in charge of looking at this. Now, to say all that said, the regulatory bodies are the backstop. They shouldn't be what you're relying on to do that testing. The manufacturers still have to be getting that up front. Like it's up to them because what happens next with, when the regulatory bodies do have it and do catch it, like, do you want to be that company that didn't have the proper food safety protocols in place where
Hmm.
the PR repercussions are coming on you and your brand. So, um, but yeah, so that was interesting. But the really interesting thing, this happened just last Thursday, is Coca-Cola filed a report with the Securities and Exchange Commission that they had suffered a cyber ransomware attack with their Fairlife
I saw
brand.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, and that has been interesting because this is something that we really wanted to start looking more into on Pro Food World to start covering more of because it's increasingly getting important. If you think about, okay, we're getting hit with, or utilities are being attacked, dealing with cyber attacks, uh, hotels are dealing with cyber attacks, but we all know that the IT, OT don't really mesh inside a food and beverage plant. It's just this conundrum that I think is, uh, I mean, if it's affecting a company as large as Coke or their Fairlife
Hmm.
brand, imagine what it could happen. I mean, with a smaller, mid-sized brand that even doesn't have the resources. So it's something that you really need to take a look at, that they really need to be just on top of. And it's, if not getting the systems in place, at least doing some sort of training with the personnel. It's really important. I mean, you guys know how much training we all have to do, you know, and we're probably not at the center of somebody's, some sort of nefarious group looking to make a
We're
quick
we're
buck.
pretty far down the list, Derek. We're pretty far down the list. I think they've got their eyes on us as Plan B or C, most likely.
Hopefully, but as this becomes more and more apparent, and I said it before, what happens when you start incorporating AI into these attacks, and making it much simpler for them to I know they've already started. I'm sure somebody's already started. You see it with robocalls, I think, that they're using AI in some of this stuff. So
Yeah.
but yeah, it's just a couple things, don't skip on food safety, don't skip on cybersecurity. That's the moral of the story.
Yeah, those are
Absolutely.
two. Those are good through lines for all of us to take home with us. Yeah.
Uh,
I don't have much this week. I've been knee deep in actually covering stories and writing stories that I've already been covering. But I did hear from my colleague Anne Marie Mohan, the inimitable Anne Marie Mohan, who actually reported on this year's brand owner boot camp, and it's an invitation only event that's hosted by Baruch International, that's formerly Nova Chemicals. Invitation only. They don't like the press there in the room because they really want to foster an environment where everybody feels extremely free to speak. I like to think that being a fly on the wall in there, we wouldn't expose anybody, or we wouldn't have any sort of gotcha journalism. But that said, it does create an environment where brand owners can talk freely amongst themselves without fear of being overheard or misquoted. So these are the likes of Mars, Kraft, General Mills, and some retailers too, like Walmart, Aldi, Target. So all of those big boys are in a room. But we did have, let's say, a mole. We did have somebody in the room who had permission to report out some of the big takeaways that brand owners are wrestling with, particularly as it relates to sustainability and sustainable materials. So first, and I hear this everywhere, is the trouble with what you would call like the last 10%. So most brands have converted the majority of their packaging to either recyclable or monomaterial designs or paper recyclable. Anywhere that they could, any of the low-hanging fruit has already been plucked, and it's actually gotten up to the mid-level and beyond. But there is this stubborn 10% of your packaging that you just can't get away from the multi-layer material because the product itself might not allow for it, or it might not have enough shelf life. So it wouldn't be practical to package outside of, let's say, a multi-layer non-recyclable pouch or something like that. So it's that getting 90 yards down the field is the last 10 yards that brand owners are having trouble with to get to those goals that might be 100% recyclable or 100% recycled material, all that sort of thing. So the second one are material changes themselves, like material advancements and material innovations. They're improving, but they're not improving fast enough. So recycled content and recycled structures, formats are getting better, but again, for the toughest applications, flexible film for food, they still need real innovation. And there are teams of scientists at these big companies working on it, but it is something that is a hurdle. The materials just aren't quite there yet. Third, we hear a lot about mechanical recycling as being the workhorse and the essential linchpin of recycling system. But the problem is mechanically recycled materials, it's much more difficult for them to get what we call a LONO or a LNO, which is a federal FDA letter of non-objection to using those materials to become packaging for food again. So food contact is really the issue there. It's great to use recycled materials for, say, I don't know, dish soap or something along those lines, but for anything that you ingest, and Liz, I suspect there's even greater uh, you know, uh, guardrails against this for pharma, but for food, anything you ingest, anything you put on your skin, let's say, they're very careful about using mechanically recycled material. So there needs to be some give there if we're going to have enough material to start making recycled material packaging at the scale that we need to.
Hmm.
Finally, and I feel like a broken record every week. I'm talking about EPR. That's a hurdle because of its fractured and fragmented nature. I always say that it's hewing to a certain trend line to become more harmonized. The last few, Minnesota, for instance, Maryland, are very similar. So it kind of started out of this funnel where fairly disparate EPR programs in Colorado, California, Oregon, Washington, but part of it is because CAA, the Circular Action Alliance, is somewhat the common denominator. It's a common producer responsibility organization, but it has sort of a de facto harmonizing effect. But still, brands have to sell into all 50 states, and
Mhm.
having to do something different or do a slightly different dance in every state is difficult. And that's why I noticed, Liz, when you were talking about the on-demand printing for sustainability, to reduce the amount of material you're using. Well, that's all stuff that needs to be reported. But if it's reported one way in Oregon and it's reported, let's say, tonnage in Oregon, and it's reported as metric tonnage in Washington, it's not real. It's an off the cuff example, but that can be difficult. So the through line for all of this is that no single brand can solve this alone. It has to be a value chain kind of situation where suppliers, brand owners, retailers, consumers, and then the back end of the system, the recyclers and reclaimers and so on, all have to have a hand in it. So we learned a lot about that at the Packaging Recycling Summit a few weeks ago. So that was all live. That was from our mole at Bruges International, now at this year's Brand Owner Boot Camp. Am I missing anything? Anything else come across your desk that we need to discuss?
Not on
Not
my
too.
end.
Yeah, because I'm still feeling the summer slowdown, which is interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm sure it's going to ramp up, as fall shows get going here and Pack Expo, and so we'll be covering a lot. And I know we'll be covering EPR, Matt, probably indefinitely. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm surprised we didn't talk about humanoid robots, but maybe that's a good thing. We'll take a week off.
Oh, well, yeah, we'll get Casey on here. He's working on
Yeah.
something right now about humanoid robots, so we'll get him on
I
and
did see something
talk.
about a humanoid robot performing some sort of surgery, which was pretty interesting. And I was trying to think about how I can bring that in. So maybe I'll dig that out for next week's end of the line, because it's not purely packaging for me to write about, but maybe it's fun to talk about because a robot performing surgery is cool.
Yeah, you
It
got to get more
is.
bodily fluids in there.
Yep.
Also, I saw there was a some sort of IT product announcement where they brought on stage a humanoid robot to kind of hold it and demonstrate it. Well, about halfway through the product launch, the robot collapsed and fell into a heap. And nobody knowing what to do, they basically just took an apron and laid it over to the robot so as nobody would be paying attention to it. My
Sure.
question was, why did they have an apron at the ready? They had to be expecting this to happen, you know? So yeah, there are still some snafus and still some kinks to be worked out on the humanoid robot side of things, but we'll hear more from Casey probably next week.
Yeah,
It's very funny.
sounds
Funny,
good.
not funny. Poor robot.
Yeah, poor robot. Good. Well,
Poor future overlord.
good to talk to everybody. Good to see everybody. We're on the outside looking in of the PMG party, but we will join them in spirit, and
Yes.
we'll get all the updates next week, I'm sure.
Sounds great.
Right.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.